You wake up in America in the 1880s. The room is freezing. The air carries the heavy, persistent smell of soot. Long before the sun rises, you are already moving. For millions of new arrivals, this was the reality of the city. In the tenements of Lower Manhattan, over 500,000 people were packed into a single square mile. In these cramped quarters, infectious diseases spread through entire blocks in a matter of days. Every meal was a matter of basic endurance. Workers relied on dense breakfasts like cornmeal mush and salt pork to sustain them through 10-hour shifts. This wasn't food for pleasure, it was fuel for physical labor. For women, domestic life meant constant, exhausting labor. Managing a household involved hauling heavy water buckets and tending cast-iron, wood-burning stoves just to keep the family fed and clothed. For the urban poor and new immigrants, the struggle to reach a stable standard of living was a daily battle. Life was defined by managing the physical requirements of staying alive. This chart shows the gap between what a worker earned and what they actually needed. The average unskilled laborer brought home roughly $100 less per year than the basic cost of living. That shortfall existed despite workers laboring 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. There was no job security and no social safety net to provide relief if a factory cut wages or closed its doors. Households had to find a way to make up that $100 difference. To survive, a single income was rarely enough. A family's standard of living was largely determined by the father's specific trade. His skill level set the ceiling for what the household could afford. Native-born, skilled workers could reach a working-class aristocrat status. They could afford meat daily and possessed the badges of respectability, Sunday-best clothing, and proper parlor furniture for guests. Unskilled immigrant families often lived in windowless tenement rooms with no indoor plumbing. They shared water buckets and lived in close proximity to waste, with little control over their immediate environment. This poverty exacted a physical price. The poorest quarter of families relied heavily on starches, eating carbohydrate-heavy suppers every night. Many dipped their bread in broth to soften it, a necessity for those who could not afford dental care for their failing teeth. Hard work and thriftiness were often not enough to bridge the income gap. These families were forced to look within their own households for more ways to generate money. Data from the 1875 Massachusetts Bureau of Statistics of Labor shows how family size impacted a household's stability. In many ways, the results are counterintuitive. This graph tracks poverty risk against the number of children. Families with 3 or 4 children were at the highest risk of debt. But as children reached 5 or more, the trend reversed, showing a significant improvement in their standard of living. Children who were too young to work were a heavy financial burden. A large family only achieved stability when the oldest children entered the workforce for additional income. Children in 1880 were expected to be economic contributors. Many entered the workforce by the age of 7 or 8, helping support the entire household. The textile industry absorbed massive numbers of young girls. They spent their days operating heavy spinning machinery, often in buildings where windows were kept sealed to prevent the cotton threads from breaking. Young boys often worked underground in coal mines. Working shifts of up to 14 hours, these boys inhaled toxic dust to generate the wages their families needed to buy bread. This was the reality for many large households. They avoided total collapse by trading the safety and education of their children for financial balance. The 19th century family functioned as a unit of production. Every member had a role in ensuring the group's survival. Idleness was a danger to the home. If an injury or illness stopped anyone from working, the household's margin of error would disappear. Every person in the house was essentially an employee whose labor was required to keep the family intact. The physical and social toll of this labor eventually reached a point that American society could no longer ignore. Photojournalists like Jacob Riis and Louis Hine documented these conditions for the public. Their images exposed the squalor of the slums and the daily reality for children living and working on the streets. Change also came from the children themselves. Newsboys organized strikes to protest their wages, fighting for a larger share of the profits they generated for massive newspaper corporations. After decades of protest, the passage of the 1938 Fair Labor Standards Act ended the nation's reliance on child earnings. It ensured that a family's existence would no longer depend on the labor of its youngest members.